Okay, just want to say a few things, Jody.
Yeah, take one.
Okay. And it's raining outside. And well, first of all, Falls Historical Society. Appreciate it, Jody, that you come down and talk to us.
You're quite welcome.
Without the microphone. Okay, first of all, we're going to talk to Jody Dennis. And we want to thank you for sitting down with the Isle Falls Historical Society.
You're welcome.
And you grew up in this area?
Yeah, I grew up in Ackley. Went to school there my whole life. Graduated from Ackley in 1994. And soon after that, moved to Iowa Falls and met my wife, and we've made our permanent residency here and raised our kids in the Iowa Falls community.
Okay. And you said you started in the National Guard while you were still in high school.
Yeah, I was a junior in high school back in 1993. I was 17 years old, and the 2 days after my 17th birthday, my parents signed a waiver allowing me to join the National Guard at 17.
How come?
Well, actually, I was doing a paper. I've always had interest in the military. Always wanted to be a Army soldier, but as a young child, you don't know that there is an organization called the National Guard. And I had a upperclassman join from Ackley, and he joined when he was 17. And I started talking to him about it and took interest in it, but it needed, you needed that waiver. So convincing mother and signing that waiver was probably more difficult than convincing father.
Okay. Well, let's see what we got here. So then you were in the Guard. When you got out of high school, you took your basic training?
Yeah, actually I took basic training the summer between my junior and senior year. And what they do for individuals that join at 17 is they'll send you down to basic training and get you back before your first day of school. And then once you get through your senior year of high school, you'll go back where I did my training was Fort Benning, Georgia, because that's where the infantry school is. And then you complete the second half of your training, which is called advanced infantry training. And so it was 2 summers down at Fort Benning.
So then you just kind of stayed in the Guard from 94 on.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay, September 11th.
September 11th. September 11th, I was working and employed with Iowa Pre-Stressed Concrete. I was outside on, and we were foreman, doing our traditional work for the day, and a supervisor who used to be in the National Guard came out the front door and said, "Jody, have you heard what happened?" We always had radios on out where we were working and stuff. I hadn't heard anything yet. And he said that they believe that there was a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center. And it seemed like, for me, it seemed like everything just kind of stopped that day at work. My mind switched to, oh Lord, where's this going to take us? What are we going to do as soldiers? A deployment in my mind became evident, and it all happened in like a 5-minute time frame. That very same supervisor came out 20 minutes later and said that they hit the Pentagon. And it just seemed like it continued on for what seemed to be 2-3 hours. He was continuously coming out saying that now they've crashed a plane, and it, in my mind, is like, when is this going to stop? I was a member of the National Guard and a known member here at the Iowa Falls Armory. And to give you an idea how tight security became that fast, as soon as I got off work, I went out to the Armory to see what they were hearing. And I couldn't even get into the Armory I belonged to because I didn't have my military ID. That's how tight security got in that short of a time frame.
So how soon after 9/11 were you called up?
I gotta do math in my head, Mike.
Months or were you?
Yeah, yeah. It was. I don't believe we got activated for approximately a year later, but we knew that an activation was going to happen, and our entire training cycle that is usually developed in the year prior to that training year stopped, and a whole new focus was brought to the table. Different things we needed to begin training on. So at that point, I believe that the state was on a notification that, you know, it's pretty evident that we're going to deploy, and we need to relook at our focuses and our training.
So then you, how soon was it, or when did you do your next, let's say, elevated training?
We spent 6 months down at Camp Shelby, Mississippi, down around Hattiesburg, just south of Hattiesburg. And that was a training site to deploy. What it is First Army, who is in charge of training all deployed soldiers and getting them trained to a specific level, runs Camp Shelby. So we knew when we were going to Camp Shelby that we were going to go to Iraq. We had certain milestones in different training events that we had to hit. And once we met all of those milestones, then First Army, who was part of the regular Army, said that the Iowa National Guard is prepared and ready to deploy.
And so, what's it like telling your family you're going to be going to war for a year, possibly?
Well, you know, at that point in time, Mike, in my career with my family, we'd already been through 2 previous deployments. So, deploying as a National Guard, I don't want to say became a norm, but it became part of our lively routines. My wife knew that my intentions were to be a career soldier and at least do 20 years and serve my country for that amount of time. And whatever came along with that, you know, she was in agreement. Whether it was deployments, whether it was training events in foreign countries or duty stations. So this one hit home a little harder. The first 2 deployments that we were deployed to were peacekeeping operations.
Where were those at?
Our very first deployment was in Saudi Arabia. We were deployed to Riyadh, which is the capital of Saudi Arabia, and we basically secured Patriot missile sites at Prince Sultan Air Base, which is Prince Sultan was the prince of Saudi Arabia. So we were there protecting the airfields, and it truly was a peacekeeping operation. There was no threat to us or against us at that point in time. This was shortly after Desert Storm.
And then your second one?
Our second deployment, we deployed to Sinai, Egypt, and you know, we were on the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. On the northern tip is the Gaza Strip, obviously. So we weren't anywhere close to the chaos that has gone on for years at the Gaza Strip, but that again was a peacekeeping operation. We were there for 9 months on that deployment. I'll back up and say that our Saudi Arabia deployment was a total of 6 months. So
you're gone for a long period of time.
Yeah, you
6
know,
months, 9 months.
Yeah.
When you come back, you see your kids, and they have grown a lot. Do you feel like you're missing out on that?
You know, at that point in time, I didn't, Mike. I'm fortunate enough to have a wife that could be the man of the house and the woman of the house at the same time. We had all 3 of our children through all of these deployments, starting when they were in diapers and all the way up to my latest deployment when they were in high school. But I didn't feel like I was missing a lot in their life until my Iraq deployment, for sure, and my Afghanistan deployment.
Okay, so you went to Iraq first?
Went to Iraq before Afghanistan.
And how long was that?
Iraq, we were activated for a total of 22 months, almost 2 years. Our original deployment time was 6 months at Camp Shelby for the train up that needed to be done. And then we were going to do 12 months in theater in Iraq. But at about 11 months, if you recall, when President Bush ordered the surge into Baghdad of troops, the soldiers out of the 101st Airborne that were going to go replace us got redirected to Baghdad. So then we became the first National Guard unit that was ever extended. Our tour got extended by 4 months.
Now, how many people are in your unit?
We deployed with approximately 850 soldiers. In my specific unit, we had close to 160, 170 soldiers.
So you end up in Iraq for 22 months. Can you tell me?
We were in Iraq for 18 months.
18 months. Okay. Can you tell me a couple stories about that?
No, I need to correct that. We were in Iraq for we did 6 months in Camp Shelby. I believe it was 16 months we were in Iraq.
And what was that like when you finally landed?
In Iraq?
Yes.
You know, we landed at Al Assad Air Base is where we were. And what it was one of Iraq's and Saddam Hussein's air bases where he trained his the Iraqi pilots in the Iraqi Air Force. We in previous years we overtook that. Obviously, that was one of the main targets when we conducted the initial airstrikes, was to knock out his airfields, and we overtook Al Assad Air Base, and it was ran by the Marines. It was actually a Marine base. We were one of 2 Army units that were stationed on that, and the rest of them were Marines. And to me, I remember walking off the plane, and it just seemed like it was a normal operating military base that we'd been on anywhere here in the United States. It was hot. You know, it was, as far as the eye could see, it was desert. It was, you know, some mountains. I don't even know if you'd really call them mountains, but it was jagged terrain. But the base itself was just like any other normal operating military base. You know, had motor pools all over the place, had dining facilities, you know, here and there. You know, that it had housing. We stayed in tents for our very first month we were there, but then we got transitioned into the housing where it would be 4 or 5 person rooms, you know. So it's just like any other normal base.
What was your job in Iraq?
What we went to Iraq to do was conduct combat operations if needed, but our primary job was to escort fuel and logistics from the border of Jordan back to Al Assad. Al Assad was a huge base, and it was a centralized hub of western Iraq. So we would escort up to 150 fuel trucks over a 3-day time frame to the border of Jordan, and then all the way back. We would take empty trucks back to Jordan, and we'd bring full trucks back. And typically it was 3-day operations, out on the roads, fighting. You know, we didn't fight a whole lot of combat forces, but we were fighting the elements. We were fighting IEDs, hundreds of IEDs. You know, that was their tactics of Western Iraq, was IED inflations.
Now they pretty much had to use the IED, the roadside bombs.
Yeah.
Because they really didn't have the equipment or they were so overwhelmed by our force and power that they couldn't really fight you guys out in the open?
Right, exactly. You know, we that wasn't our primary mission when we were there, was to go out looking for Al Qaeda and fighting these freedom fighters, if that's what you want to call them. Our mission was to escort logistics. So if they wanted to do harm to us, they knew the places to do that was on the roads, because that's where we were operating. We were escorting convoys, you know, securing convoys and securing logistics. They surely weren't going to come and fight us with AK-47s and RPGs, because there was 30 of us gun trucks out there on the road escorting all these convoys with heavy weapons, 50 cal machine guns. You know, they'd have been no match for us. So their way of fighting us was in placing IEDs.
And did you hit IEDs?
I had a total of 4 IED strikes on my vehicle alone. We encountered hundreds of IED blasts, and we found somewhere around 100 IEDs that we were able to actually visually see and prevent, you know, the explosion from going off one way or another, or avoid them. But
now, you said you got hit 4 times by a roadside bomb.
Yep.
And what was that like?
Oh. Loud, deafening loud. I remember the first IED strike that happened. It happened on my side of the vehicle. I was the truck commander, and I'll speak briefly on this, but I was the second vehicle to ever get struck by an IED in our entire unit, and this was about 2 weeks into our deployment. So we didn't know their tactics at that time. And the blast went off by my door, right on the edge of the road. We believe that it was a radio activated IED, which means they had a way to detonate it from a different location. We believe they were watching us from an overpass, and they had it figured out. They had it timed just right that when we drove by, it went off. And I remember, I just remember a flash. I don't even remember hearing anything at first. I just remember a flash, and all of a sudden it was dark in our vehicle. Well, the darkness was from all the dirt and dust, and it was almost hard to breathe in the vehicle, because you couldn't catch your breath for one. You know, the shock of the blast set in, and then it was so dirty inside the vehicle from the sand and the debris and the road, and that you were having a hard time catching your breath, almost like being in a sandstorm. And we encountered a few